Dr. Anna is a postdoctoral fellow at Waterloo Centre for Astrophysics and Perimeter Institute, Canada. She's interested in galaxy formation and evolution. She's heavily involved in science communication and outreach and had an outreach column on a local Argentinian radio show. She also regularly gives planetarium shows using Waterloo's AstroBubble. Thank you so much for being here today. So, you wanted to be a writer as a young child. So, how is it that you decided to become an astrophysicist? Do you remember a specific moment that made you realize this?
So when I was little, I wanted to be a writer because I liked reading books and felt that made sense. But then when I was in high school, I was good at maths. I was not super good, but I did better than in other classes. So I figured that could be something I could use. And then I liked computers a lot. So I thought maybe I could do something with programming, but I didn't really want to give up like on my writing dreams. And then I met someone in my high school whose father was an astronomer, and I started looking into it. And I went to the university in my city, which is located in an observatory. And when I saw the telescopes, I mean, the telescopes we have in my city are not actually, they're not used for science anymore. They're just used for outreach, and they are like 200 years old. So they're not super high tech, as you can imagine. But they are really nice and they're really pretty. And I realized, I guess at that point, I had kind of assumed that astronomy just meant like physics and like hard maths. And that sounded appealing, but it scared me a little bit. And then when I saw the telescopes, I started to look into doing observational astronomy. And that sounded fun. But to be honest, I wasn't like fully convinced. I wanted to be an astronomer until I was like halfway through my undergrad in astronomy, when I actually worked with observations for the first time. Because what happened to me is that I was, like I said, I was good at maths in high school, and then maths in college was harder, and physics was harder. And I realized like I could pass the classes, but I didn't super enjoy it, and that frightened me. I was like, I don't know if I want to do this for a job. But then observational astronomy is completely different. Like the way that you work is not just doing equations. Uh, you just work with computers a lot, and it's a very creative job. Like it's not exactly writing novels, but you do have to be creative to do research. So I was in, I think, third year of my undergrad when I did my first observational course, and I was like, this makes sense. Like this combines maths, something a little bit creative, and I can actually work with a computer and not have to like do a lot of hard physics that I was not super interested in doing.
That's really interesting how you were still able to get that creativity out through your career after all. It's really interesting. So who were your role models and how did their journeys influence your own path?
Well, it's a very good question. So in my university, there were a lot of female professors, which I think if you'd asked me when I was a teenager, I would not have been. I don't think I knew how important it was to have female role models. But then when you start college and you start to see grown men everywhere, uh, that can be a bit underwhelming. I don't know if that's the right word, but it doesn't feel as motivating. But I had one professor in my early undergrad, and she was really excited about her job, and she seemed like a person who had a good life outside of research, but was still very good in her field, and she was a really nice professor. Uh, and I think she is the one that taught the class where I decided that I actually wanted to do astronomy for a living. And then she was my advisor in my PhD, so she influenced me very directly. And I think, yeah, she really helped me sort of shape the way that I viewed my research as just a part of my life and not the driving force for everything. You know, I've never been, like I said, I wasn't like super interested in astronomy before high school, so I didn't have like historic role models or anything. I just mainly got inspired from professors and then my other students in my classes, just seeing other people with different struggles and how everyone faced them. I think that was the most inspiring thing for me.
Very nice. And how now you are the role model for so many young girls who want to study physics. So it's a cycle that keeps on going. Um, so what was the process of choosing a college to study in? And was it an easy decision to make, considering you weren't really sure whether you really wanted to pursue this subject?
Well, in Argentina, where I did my undergrad and my PhD and everything, you have to choose your career as soon as you're out of high school. So like you immediately choose astronomy or physics or whatever it is. So I was very young, and when I started my last year of high school, I was kind of terrified about having to make that choice because it felt like a big commitment, and I liked so many different things. And so over there, so college is free, so it doesn't really matter. Like you cannot choose a career and then just decide that's not for you and then choose something else. But it felt like, I mean, my time felt valuable, so I didn't want to risk maybe getting into something and then having to decide to drop it seemed like a lot. And then I took a course on like for orientation, uh, which basically made you fill out a bunch of quizzes and then told you what careers were good for you. At that point, I kind of knew I wanted to do astronomy, but I wasn't sure. And basically, what happened is I took the course and realized I didn't care too much for any of the other options. Like everything else sounded much more boring. The person that was giving the course suggested that I do instead something more applied, like engineering. I think she wanted to say something more useful, but didn't dare. But then, like, I looked at the programs and I was like, the stars look so much more interesting than anything else. So that helped me. Like, I had a concept of astronomy, but yeah, it is always a bit of a hard decision. But I think if you are interested in the topic and you like maths and physics, it doesn't have to be that you love them. Like, if you like them a regular amount and you really want to know about the universe, I think it's a great career path to choose.
It's a lot of pressure having to decide your entire future right after high school. So you have various teaching experiences from your time at college. What was it like teaching scientific concepts, and what did you learn from those experiences?
Well, I mainly taught one of the first courses in physics that you have in your undergrad. I was a TA, so my job basically consisted of we had like theory hours and then practice hours where they get like sets of exercises that they had to do, and TAs would kind of sometimes I don't know solve things on the blackboard for everyone, but mainly we just stood there and students would come and ask questions and ask for help. So it was a lot of work because when you first start college, especially, well, I've never been a TA anywhere else, so I don't know what it's like somewhere outside of Argentina, but I feel like people come with very different levels of knowledge from high school. So it takes a little bit of time for everyone to find their way. And I think I spent a lot of my time as a TA helping people figure out college life more than actually helping them understand how to like calculate the path of anything. Um, because as a TA, like I was, I think I was 23, 24, and they were 18. So you're as close as it can get in age to the students. So I think it was a really nice experience. It was hard because I never had to teach, and no one really teaches you how to teach. I think the hardest thing about, especially about teaching like scientific things, is that I'd already done all of my physics courses and having to go back and figure out how to explain to someone that hasn't gone through all of that, how to do like the more basic things. Uh, I think it's hard, but it's also very interesting because it kind of forces you to reframe how you think about those concepts. Like you learn by explaining it, and then I think the social part mainly was the most important one. Like I feel like when I was 18, I really liked having nice TAs that I could ask questions about, like how do I manage to take all of these exams and not like die in the process. I think that was the best part of being a teaching assistant.
That sounds so nice. And it's how your knowledge was becoming even stronger while teaching as you constantly revisit it. So, were you intimidated by the complexity of the subject, as you were saying, and the requirements from academia? So, if yes, then what do you think of that constantly pushes you to move forward and keep working?
Well, yes, the easy answer is definitely. I was mainly intimidated by like the physics part of it. I think physics sounds very scary. When you, I had high school physics, but it was simpler. And then you look at words like quantum, and you're like, how am I in my head going to ever fit all of that information? But I think so. The thing about college is that you go through the courses. Like by the time you get to, I don't know, quantum mechanics, you've already learned a lot. Like you will always, college is gonna prepare you for whatever comes next, right? Even in terms of like classes, like you'll have a simple class and then you'll have a bit of a harder one. And it doesn't make a lot of sense to like scare yourself before you're at the stage where you actually need to learn the things, right? I think in my job, it's still intimidating. Of course, astronomy is, I mean, the universe is huge, and there's so many things. And I think the scariest thing that I've found in astronomy is that it's a huge field because the universe has a lot of things in it. So it feels like it's constantly moving and you can never keep up and you can never know everything. And it always feels like you're missing out on something or someone is doing something better than you are. That whole thing can feel scary. But I think what helps me is that I really enjoy my little side of astronomy. I like what I do. I like my galaxies, and I think it helps me to actually embrace the fact that you're never gonna know everything about the universe. You're never gonna be fully up to date. Never gonna know all of physics. So it just, I feel like once you accept that, you can kind of let it go and just enjoy the things that you are doing at the moment and just go step by step.
Yeah, because I look at the physics and I see there's so much to learn, but then when you focus on one thing, it just becomes less overwhelming as such. You were awarded the studentship by the European Space Observatory. What did you learn from that 1 year experience, and how do you think it influenced your career path?
Well, my year at ISO was amazing. It was kind of complicated because I did it in 2021. So life and traveling was still very complicated. Especially, I did my studentship in Chile, and Chile had very strict measures for lockdowns and everything. So I didn't get as much of an observing experience as I expected to have, but it was still amazing. I think I'd done most of my studies at home, so I'd always been in the same place, in the same institute, with the same people. And ESO is a super international organization. So once you get there, you realize that everyone is from a different place and everyone speaks a different language. And there's just so much to learn just from everyone's completely different experiences in life and in astronomy. And then observatory life, I've been lucky enough to experience it both at ISO and at Gemini Observatory, and in the observatory we have in Argentina. And it's just such an insane thing to witness. Uh, the way I work with observational data is that I get the data delivered to me, like someone observes it and then sends it to me. And I think that's how a lot of astronomers work these days. Like you just download your information. So going to an observatory, seeing these gigantic telescopes, seeing all of the work that people have to do to operate a telescope and observe at night and stay up for maybe 20 nights in a row, just looking at the sky and trying to get your data. I think it's both very inspiring because it makes you like want to go out and observe as many things as you possibly can, just seeing all of the instruments and all of the telescopes, like you want to do everything. And it also makes you respect the work that observers do quite a lot, because it's hard to realize how complex it is to be up there. So yeah, I think my time at ISO was amazing. I think ISO has a lot of opportunities for students during undergrad and masters, and they're all just very good because they will take you places that you cannot really go to without them.
That's amazing. And what are your favorite popular science books, movies, or podcasts?
So when I started, decided I was going to be an astronomer, someone gifted me. Like I've told you, I wasn't really thinking of astronomy before that, so I didn't like consume a lot of things. And then when I decided I was going to do an astronomy, I was like, I don't know anything about astronomy. Like I need something basic. And my uncle gifted me Cosmos by Carl Sagan. And so at the summer between my last year of high school and my first year as an undergrad, I just sat down and read the Cosmos and took notes, and it just blew my mind. I was like, why had I not read this before? Of course, this is what I want to do for a living. Like, this is amazing. And not only that, but it came in very handy. Like for my first, I don't know, year and a half, there was a lot of things that we learned in college that I had already learned just from reading a book that's like so many decades old. But like he is so good at explaining, and he was so ahead of his time that after that I just went and bought basically every Sagan book and just read them all. Uh, and I think those are the ones that I hold closest to my heart, to be honest.
I was watching the series Cosmos by Carl Sagan, and I was fascinated by how good he is at explaining such complex topics to a general audience. He's just amazing. How important do you think coding is in your job, and how do you
Oh,
think students who are interested in physics can start learning it from early on?
yeah. So coding is very important. I think coding is the only thing that is important across all areas of astronomy equally. Like you can do more math, more physics, less physics, more data work or less, but coding you're just always gonna have to do. Of course, it's at different levels. I code maybe less than people who do simulations or more complex things, but there's just no other way to get around working with data. I think right now it's very easy to find things where you can learn Python. And Python is, I think, the friendliest uh, thing you can learn. Most things nowadays are just things that are written in Python, and I think that is what people will expect from a student after undergrad. It's not a thing that you have to, like, you don't necessarily have to learn how to code before undergrad. I do think most universities don't really prepare you for how much coding you're just going to have to do. It's just something that students end up having to learn by themselves. So if it does interest someone and they have free time during high school, I found a lot of cool resources are just easy to find if you just look for simple courses on Python, and that's going to get you, I think, ahead very quickly. Um, I'm trying to think. I feel like I did a bunch during my undergrad by just like Googling Python free courses, and I just took them all. I think once you start doing it and you start figuring out what you find easy and what you find hard, then you can just look for more specific courses. Like I could not really understand how to do uh, some of the statistics things. Then I just did like a specific Python statistics course. There's a lot of other languages that you code in, and you can do other courses. But I think if you can like figure out Python and just understand it, then everything else will come easier.
What skills is it that you require day to day in your professional life that you didn't think would be required before starting?
Ooh. Uh, well, coding. I didn't know coding was going to be this important in general. I think, well, I also started college a few years ago, and I think it was less commonly known that everyone was just going to be coding by now. Um, I think the main thing that, like, look in hindsight, and like, of course, this makes sense, but being a researcher requires a lot of self-control and just being very good at managing your own time. Because for the most part, in most cases, I think being a researcher means you are usually mainly the person in charge of figuring out how you're going to schedule your days. Like it's maybe in some places it's not, but I think in most universities, if you're a researcher, especially after being a master's, like while you're a PhD and especially as a postdoc, no one's going to tell you what you need to do by the end of the day. Like you have deadlines, but the deadlines are going to be maybe months away. And no one's going to ask you how much progress you've made this week. Like people are just going to expect you to make the deadline. And that is very hard to manage. At least for me, it was very hard to manage. I was very good at working with the structure. Like I was good at school and at college because I knew how to make my life work within the timetable and make deadlines within a week. But then suddenly having someone tell you, oh, this needs to be done in the next 6 months. And then you just have to figure out what time you're going to get to work, how many hours you're going to work in which project. You're going to have 1,000 projects. You need to prioritize. So all of the time management skills I did not expect. And I think most people don't expect them because I don't think astronomers are necessarily very good at them, but we should be. You kind of need to get better at them, I guess.
How do you think current high school students can gain insight into scientific research and work with other scientists?
Well, I don't know if I think high school students need to do research. I think high school is for high school. I think I know that nowadays it's becoming more common, but I think high school is a good moment to learn about a number of things. You can learn about different subjects. You don't need to get married to astronomy yet, and you can enjoy your time as a teenager. And I think the best thing you can do is take advantage of all of the outreach that astronomers do, like you are obviously doing. There's a lot of books to read. You can learn a lot on your own. I think research requires maybe a little more time, and it's a commitment that I don't think high school students necessarily need. I do know that there are some projects like summer schools for high school students where you can, for example, Perimeter kind of feels like unnecessary promo, but I'm participating in one, so I have that one in mind right now. Perimeter holds a school for high school students every year in the summer, which is online. And instead of you're not doing research, but you do get like classes from researchers, and then you do a small project with a postdoctoral fellow at Perimeter, and then it's not a research project, like it's something that someone thought of to for students your age, and then it's not gonna like be work that you have to do. It's just something so you can learn and enjoy it. And I think in many countries, institutes will have things like that where you can interact with researchers, especially summer schools. But I think you don't need to become involved too heavily. Like you will get plenty of time during your college career to do work. Like maybe now is the time to enjoy that you don't have to do work right now in research.
I think a lot of high school students forget that it's time to explore right now and not become too committed to something. So would you like to share what's next for you, as in terms of astronomy and so on?
Yeah, well, I'm just starting my position, so I will be at Waterloo for the next 3 years. I started in November last year, so I'm just starting to get settled to Canadian winter and all of that, which is interesting and complicated. And I think so. My plan is to stay in academia, but it is a path that can take you to places you don't expect necessarily. So I don't know where I'll be after these 3 years. For now, I'm just gonna keep on working, and I'm very excited because I have a few projects with the big telescopes that are coming up. So I think that's going to be a big step for everyone in astronomy, and I'm just happy to be somewhere where I can be involved. But yeah, I'll tell you in a couple of years what's going to happen after.
Sounds really exciting. What do you think is the best part of being an astronomer?
Oh, I love a lot of parts of being an astronomer, to be honest. I think getting to study the universe is already, I think, in the top five, but getting to choose the object that you care more about in the whole universe and getting to study that for the rest of your life is pretty amazing. Like if I get tired of coding or writing and I feel stressed, I just go and look at the images of galaxies and remind myself that those are actual galaxies like the Milky Way that I'm getting to observe for the first time and like see what they have in them and then just go and tell other people what those galaxies are doing and what they're made of. And I think that thrill is probably the best part of it.
It really is. As in, it's so fascinating that we live in such a huge universe, and it's just crazy. Well, that's wonderful. Thank you so much, Dr. Anna, for sharing your experiences. I learned a lot from it, and I hope my audience did too.